Between 1974 and 1986, one man terrorized California for over a decade. He wasn't just a serial killer, he was also a serial rapist, a burglar, and perhaps most disturbingly, a police officer. He attacked from Sacramento to Orange County. By the time it was over, investigators linked him to at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 120 burglaries. For decades, he had many names: the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker. Eventually, the world would know him as the Golden State Killer. You know what makes this case different? It wasn't just how long he got away with it. It was the fact that for years nobody realized they were hunting the same man. Let's open the file.
Case started in 1976. Started on June 18, 1976 with a rape of a female in the Rancho Cordova, Carmichael area of Sacramento. It extended beyond there with 24 different attacks here in Sacramento, where rapes of single females and or individual would break into the house, attack a couple, and rape the female. We know that he would pry open windows and doors at the rear of residences, would then enter the residence, would then proceed to the bedroom. At the time, either the single female victim or a couple would be in their bedroom asleep, shine a flashlight in their eyes. They would see a dark figure with a ski mask on. He would then have the female bind the male individual. He would then bind the female individual with shoestrings or whatever he could find. He would then proceed to retie the male victim.
At first, detectives believed they were dealing with a single rapist targeting quiet Sacramento neighborhoods. But each attack revealed something even more disturbing. He wasn't choosing houses at random. He watched them for days, sometimes weeks. He learned the victims' routines, knew when the lights went out, and often entered only after everyone was asleep. He left almost no evidence behind. And every time police thought they were getting closer, he disappeared, only to strike again. By the end of 1976, fear had spread across Sacramento. Families installed stronger locks, bought guard dogs, and slept with loaded firearms beside their beds. Yet none of it seemed to stop him. Detectives gave him a name that would haunt California for years: the East Area Rapist. Then, the case took an even darker turn. 9 months after the first attack, police received a phone call. The man on the other end claimed to be the East Area Rapist. "I already have my next victim stalked, and you guys can't catch me." It wasn't an empty threat. Later that very day, he attacked again. By the end of 1977, the terror had spread beyond the crime scenes. The Sacramento Bee newspaper, and even the city's mayor, received letters from someone claiming to be the East Area Rapist. One letter included a disturbing poem titled "Excitement's Crave." "Sacramento should make an offer to make a movie of my life that will pay for my planned exile." Whether it was a confession, a taunt, or simply another mind game, investigators couldn't be certain. Then came the phone calls. In early 1978, previous victims began receiving terrifying late-night calls. Sometimes he whispered. Sometimes he threatened to kill them. Those calls didn't stop after the attacks. Incredibly, reports of similar calls continued for decades, with some lasting until 2001. Then, the investigation took an unexpected turn. On February 2, 1978, Brian and Katie McGraw were out walking their dog in Rancho Cordova. Neither of them ever made it home. The young couple had been shot to death. At the time, detectives didn't connect the murders to the East Area Rapist. It would take nearly 40 years before investigators finally confirmed they were among his victims. But Sacramento was no longer enough. By the end of 1978, the attacks spread across the Bay Area. Concord, San Jose, Danville, Fremont, Walnut Creek. Different cities, same nightmare. Every new attack proved the same terrifying fact: he could strike almost anywhere. Then, on October 1, 1979, a masked intruder broke into a home in Goleta, near Santa Barbara. He tied up a young couple, but this time, a neighbor heard screams. The attacker fled before he could finish. It was the first time. Someone had interrupted him. 3 months later, another couple was found murdered inside their Goleta home. From that moment on, the crimes became far more violent. Over the next 2 years, more victims were found bound, assaulted, and murdered inside their own homes. Southern California detectives gave the killer a new name, the original Night Stalker. No one realized. They were hunting the very same man who had terrorized Northern California for years. Then, without warning, the murders stopped. By 1986, the killer had vanished. No more break-ins, no more phone calls, no more bodies. For decades, no one knew whether he was dead, in prison under another name, or quietly living among ordinary people. The investigation grew cold. Hundreds of detectives, thousands of interviews, millions of dollars. Nothing. Then more than 30 years later, science finally caught up with him. In 2018, investigators used genetic genealogy to identify a suspect through DNA left at multiple crime scenes. The man they arrested wasn't hiding in another country. He wasn't living under a fake identity. He was quietly living in suburban Sacramento. His name? Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, a father, a neighbor, and one of the most prolific serial offenders in American history. In 2020, at the age of 74, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to dozens of charges, including 13 murders and numerous kidnappings. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For more than 40 years, his victims waited for answers. Some never lived long enough to see justice. But in the end, the man who believed he was untouchable was finally identified by a single strand of DNA. Case closed.
I've listened to all your statements, each one of them, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Imagine receiving a letter from a serial killer, not asking for money, not apologizing. Instead, he demands that newspapers print his message on the front page. He includes a coded cipher, signs it with a strange symbol, and ends with 4 chilling words.
This is the Zodiac speaking.
More than 50 years later, his identity remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. December the 20th, 1968. On a lonely road near Benicia, California, 2 teenagers parked their car before Christmas break. 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen never made it home. A gunman approached the vehicle without warning. David was shot inside the car. Betty tried to run, but collapsed just a short distance away after being shot multiple times. Police had almost nothing to work with. No witnesses, no suspect, no motive. At the time, investigators believed it was simply another tragic double homicide. They had no idea. It was only the beginning. Just 7 months later, another young couple parked in a quiet area known as Blue Rock Springs. Without warning, headlights appeared behind them. The driver stepped out carrying a flashlight. The couple assumed it was a police officer. Instead, he opened fire. 19-year-old Michael Mageau survived despite multiple gunshot wounds. His girlfriend, Darlene Farron, died shortly afterward. Less than an hour later, the local police department received a phone call. The caller calmly confessed to both attacks. Then he simply hung up. The hunt for the mysterious killer had officially begun. Weeks later, 3 California newspapers received nearly identical letters. The writer claimed responsibility for the murders. To prove it, he revealed details only the killer could have known. Each envelope also contained one piece of a strange 408-character cipher. He demanded the newspapers publish it. If they refused, he threatened to kill again. Soon afterward, a schoolteacher and his wife solved the code. But instead of revealing his identity, the message became even more disturbing. It described killing as something he enjoyed and claimed his victims would become his servants in the afterlife. From that moment on, the killer signed every letter the same way, a cross-circle symbol and the name Zodiac. In September 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard relaxed beside Lake Berryessa. A man approached wearing a black executioner's hood, with a white cross-circle symbol stitched onto his chest. He tied them up. Then, without warning, he stabbed them repeatedly. Before leaving, he walked to their car and wrote the dates of his previous attacks on the door. For the first time, The killer had left behind his own signature at a crime scene. The Zodiac continued sending letters for years. Some included more ciphers. Others mocked police or threatened school children. Thousands of suspects were investigated. One name appeared again and again, but no one has ever been officially charged. Even today, the Zodiac Killer's true identity remains unknown. A man who didn't just want to kill. He wanted the entire world to remember his name. London, 1888. A city of nearly 5 million people. Fog filled the streets. Gas lamps barely lit the alleys. And somewhere in the darkness, a man was hunting. He murdered women just blocks away from busy roads, then disappeared before anyone saw his face. Police searched for months. Thousands of people were questioned. Hundreds of suspects were investigated. Yet more than 130 years later, no one knows who Jack the Ripper really was. The murders took place in Whitechapel, one of London's poorest districts. Crime was everywhere. Many women survived by doing sex work simply to afford food or a bed for the night. On August 31st, 1888, the body of Mary Ann Nichols was discovered in a narrow street. Her throat had been cut. Her injuries shocked even experienced officers. At first, police believed it was an isolated murder. They were wrong. Only 8 days later, another victim, Annie Chapman, was found. The killer had struck again. This time, the injuries were even more disturbing. Detectives realized they weren't chasing an ordinary murderer. They were hunting someone becoming increasingly confident. Then came the night that terrified all of London. September 30th, 1888. Within just a few hours, 2 women were murdered. The first was Elizabeth Stride. Unlike the others, her injuries suggested the killer had been interrupted before he could continue. Less than an hour later, he found another victim, Catherine Eddowes. This crime scene was even more horrific. The brutality convinced investigators they were dealing with the same killer. That night became known as the double event. Panic spread across London. People refused to walk alone after sunset. Some carried knives. Others formed neighborhood patrols. Everyone feared they could be next. Then something even stranger happened. Newspapers began receiving letters. One was signed, Jack the Ripper. It was the first time that name had ever appeared. The writer mocked police. He claimed they would never catch him. Soon, the entire world knew the nickname. Whether the letters were truly written by the killer or by someone seeking attention remains unknown. But the name survived, and the legend was born. The final victim generally accepted by historians was Mary Jane Kelly. She was murdered inside her own room on November 9th, 1888. Because the crime happened indoors, the killer had more time. It became the most horrifying scene of all. Then, he disappeared. No arrest, no confession, no verified identity. Over the years, more than 100 suspects have been proposed. Doctors, butchers, artists, even members of the royal family. But no theory has ever been proven. More than a century later, Jack the Ripper remains history's most famous unidentified serial killer. A ghost who stepped out of the London fog, left 5 victims behind, and vanished without a trace. Maybe one day, new evidence will finally reveal who he was. Or maybe this case will remain one of history's greatest mysteries forever. I'm Detective Jack. Thanks for helping me reopen another cold case. I'll see you in the next investigation.